We're recording.
All right, got it. Well,
Thank you, Thomas.
hello everybody that is actually interested enough to watch the recording. And thanks to everybody for coming. And some of the thoughts I had on some things that are happening in the space, and there's a lot happening and it seems to be happening really fast. So these are just some kind of thoughts as to where it touched some of my own interests and work. But um so we touched on emotions, and how to model or simulate that a little bit with using Chat GPT to express those emotions. So how you integrate your robot with an emotional model and get it expressed. So I did do some work on that, so we can get to that at some point of how I see that moving forward. I'm feeling okay about that, like it's some good progress. The same can be said of personality, except I haven't really dived into that yet. But I think some of the principles are the same. But there's lots of different models of personality. After using Chat GPT more and more, I've gone back and been reevaluating some of the topics that we covered over the last 6 months to see, like, well, how does that change? How do some of these new capabilities change things that, done in the past? And from the looks of it, there's more convergence. Whereas we used to have a lot more specialized models, now there are still some of them are useful, but I think a number of them will converge. And one of them I think is question answering. We can get into some of that. It does require doing extra work, some programming on top of that to really make Chat GPT work in all the different question answering contexts, because you can have general and personal, and we can talk about each of those tonight if anybody is interested. But there's probably a good half dozen major kinds of contexts, and because chat is trained, generally it's not going to know, for example, about you personally unless you tell it, or it's not going to know what happened, like what you're seeing, unless you tell it, or like what your robot is seeing. So if you were to ask it like a visual question, that's another context. So
No, Martin, they're trying to build that into GPT, or they have into GPT-4.
yeah, well, I think it's all, from what I can tell, everything that was applicable to what I call the squad models, which are those are the old questions, is also applicable, and a lot of the same techniques can be used using Chat GPT. It's kind of cool because you get extra benefits along with it. Like, you can ask, a math question, but instead of just getting a math answer, you can get a math answer with attitude, because you can add the personality dimension into it. And so I find with my own stuff, if I ask a hideously simple question, I get quite a bit of beration from the robot, and I maybe get an answer, because it's something that any kindergartner should know. So I find that entertaining, math. And the same is true of so many other things. So it's like how you build that context and hand it over, to one of these, newer models, I think is the ball game for so many use cases. So we can talk about that more. I think there's an interesting area emerging of, like, potential for robot self-improvement. Like in the last week, I actually started using some code in the robot that was written by a model. So I don't know, the nerd part of me finds that interesting, because in the old sci-fi movies, you know, that was like, I don't know, has anybody seen like Automata or other, that was always one of those like things that they prevented the robots from doing, was improving themselves. Because if they could do that, then they could take over and make themselves better, you know, than us or than we ever could. So I find it interesting that I don't know, you know, when you would call the exact date of this transition, but in theory, it's possible for, you know, our robot brains to self-improve now. Now I haven't like taken a use case and actually made it work, but I'll give you an example. Like I've talked about a really important part of verbal is recognition of intent, which you need to do before you ever even think about a model. You need to figure out kind of like what's the general idea behind what's being asked or said at that time. And so I started asking, for example, Chat GPT Turbo, the 3.5 version that's like 10 times cheaper, to write code for me for some of these things. And it was actually writing workable verbal code. So I asked it, one example I gave was write a Python function to determine the main lemma in a sentence. And it declared all the stuff and wrote the code and whatever. And I did another one to say, write a Python function to determine the plural of a noun. And it did that, and that wasn't as impressive because it didn't handle like all the exceptions, but it made a reasonable try. And even today I had it writing, I had some problems that I was having trouble solving with just geometry and math in my 3D stuff. And so I said, well, I asked GPT to like do it. So I had a bunch of polygon points and I said, well, write a Python function to sort a list of points in clockwise order. And it wrote an algorithm and explained it and explained the rationale or the limitations of its own algorithm. And I was like, wow. So anyway, not to, I mean, this is really just a topic introduction, but this thing of robots being able to improve themselves with minimal work from us, I think is something I'm going to be getting more and more involved in. So then beyond that, you know, there's all the creative pursuits that we can talk about. And I think we've already touched on some of those, and, you know, these AIs writing various things. So there's code, there's poetry, there's writing, there's essays. It's kind of anything now that you can imagine. You can probably get you know, Chat GPT or something comparable to do it for you. So as much of a quantum leap as some of our models were from last year, I think we're witnessing, you know, we've witnessed at least another quantum leap last fall probably, and now with 4.0 and its longer context, it's probably another one going on, you know, as we speak. So in that, you know, robots creating art, it kind of raises the question, well, can robots appreciate art? How would you get a robot to appreciate art? So that's another topic we could get into.
How do you know if they're appreciating art?
What's that?
How do you really know if they're appreciating art, or they're just giving you the words that say they're appreciating art?
I mean, yeah, with a robot, you know, everything, yeah, like how do you know it's doing anything? So it's programming or it's a model, a combination, yeah. But how do you get it to like have a preference for one piece of art over another? And at the point that it can do that in some meaningful way, is that not an appreciation of sorts? That's, you know, anyway. So another topic, I don't want to make the intro be big, but I want you guys to kind of think of tonight as like an a la carte menu and take it wherever you want to. But there is another big area that we can also, or maybe not tonight, but get into, I think that we need to, and that's verbal initiative. So all those kind of use cases around how you get the robot to initiate intelligently, speak first, and there's different ways to do that. And if we get all bored with verbal, I finally got the robot to point at, form a plan and execute it of driving across a room and finding that beer and reaching over and touching it. It's not picking it up, but it's doing the other steps. So we can, if we need a fun break from all the words, we can do some beer. So having said that, Thomas, do you want to kick off the part that you, I know you brought something.
Oh yeah, I always bring things. Sure. So we're talking about GPT-4 here, and I got a license for GPT Plus. There are more and more models every week. There seems to be another model of this or that. And I'll give you an example of GPT-4, but I would just want to show you an article about it that I found that's pretty interesting here. And I'm not going to read you the whole article, just going to go through the highlights. Also, I putting the link to the GPT model that is downloadable. It's in the chat. It's huge. It takes a very powerful machine. And two of my friends have got it going already.
When you say powerful, how powerful?
Not as powerful as Chat GPT, but just below.
No, I mean, what kind of hardware do you need?
Oh, I don't remember the exact specs, but it's quite high end. I think approximately $3,000 to $5,000 worth of hardware, as I recall.
Yeah, I think it. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think I'm not sure who's. Oh, I'm getting feedback. That's why.
Yeah.
So somebody said they were using a 3090 for this desktop 3090, top end 3090.
Well, it could be, and then they said they just released a smaller model that can run on most standard desktops or laptops. So I don't remember the name and configuration of that one, but I know it was released just a week or so ago. I mean, this stuff is changing week to week. It's amazing. So let me share my screen. And let's see. Can you see that article now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, can you read it? Is the text big enough?
Yeah, it's coming through now.
Yeah, it's clear.
So GPT-4 now, it can process images alongside of the text. It's multimodal. Remember that word. Whereas GPT 3.5, that would be Chat GPT, as I recall, could only process text. GPT 4, or maybe this is GPT plus. Chat GPT plus is 3.5, as I recall. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you know, because I am tending to get these mixed up. They keep incrementing them. So the New York Times highlighted one demo where they showed the interior of a refrigerator. And they asked what meals could I make with these foods?
Mm-hmm.
And then here's the answer. Based on the items visible in the fridge, here are a couple meal ideas. Yogurt parfait with instructions, carrot and hummus wrap, with instructions. Roll up and enjoy. So if that's a taste of what's to come, we've got a long and interesting future here. We've got a very interesting future in the next few years.
Yeah.
And the other thing is verbal. It was gonna allow you to record verbal and verbally as well. I don't see that in this article. It's better playing with language. Now, one of the things I found is some of the GPT models, they don't want to take on a role. And the minute you ask it, well, what do you think is better? They're going to tell you that they can't think and that they don't know what's better because they're different. And you can get them to contradict themselves real easily. I did that earlier today. So there you go. Let's see. Better at playing with language. Oh, and also I asked it to do some coding for me. I said I couldn't remember the Python command to get the number of specific characters in a string. So I asked GPT to help me. Well, it gave me a little routine, but it didn't. There's a command. There's a object that will let you get the number of characters in a string. It didn't even list that. So it gave me an answer, but not a good enough answer. It can process more text. It can ace tests. But that's what computers are good at, acing tests, playing games, We all knew that. That's nothing new. Used in mainstream products. Duolingo is now working with them. Khan Academy. If you got kids, you know all about the Khan Academy. And of course, it's now in Bing. How many people have noticed they have AI in their Bing web browser?
That would mean using.
I haven't used it.
Here, let me share that screen.
I'd be curious as to what percentage of people would give Bing a chance.
So you see this little Bing in the corner here of your Edge browser? Well, that's your AI right there. That's your chat AI. And
What's your chat AI?
the B in the corner. You see that B in the corner there?
Oh, okay.
Where? Oh, okay.
Can you see that? Right there, the little blue B. You click on that, and you have to sign into chat. And it signed me in right away. Look at that. Isn't that great? So ask me anything. How are you? Well, I guess I left out the rest of the word there. You. And this one's not much fun. You really can't give it to get it to be a personality. You can say something like, your role is to judge my answers to your questions. Now watch how it pushes back and doesn't want to answer that. Can you read that? Can you read that, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I prefer not to continue this conversation. Then you have to start.
So they
You
found
cannot give a
interesting is
personality to this thing, is what you're saying, right?
What's that?
You cannot give a personality to this thing. Is that what you're indicating?
Not directly. No, you got to really mess with it to get it there. Also, you could say, What bad things did, and I'm not going to say Trump, I'm going to say Biden. Biden do? And these are called guardrails. Ooh, here we go. So there you go. Write a poem about Biden.
So what did you say about the guardrail? I mean, you're expecting that it's not going to say anything, but it's saying something.
It refused to say something yesterday. Like I say, these things change day to day. So there you go. There's a poem about Biden.
Wait, so if the data is from the 2021, correct?
What's the
Uh,
date?
This is using GTP4 now, though.
This is, yeah, I think this is 4. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but the data repository is still not updated as what they claim to be, right? So if you ask about a latest incident, then it should not be able to answer.
Yeah.
Okay, let's ask it the latest incident. Tell me the news for yesterday.
I guess.
I don't know. Maybe you're right.
That
So
might be a special case.
Is any of this current? Yes, there we go. It is current. Trump going to be indicted. That's pretty current.
Well,
Yeah, that's debatable. That was probably true in every year for the past,
the late show. Okay.
Give me, all right. How about the tornado in California?
Yeah.
Tell me about the tornado. When was that? Yesterday?
Yesterday.
We get all upset. We don't get tornadoes here much.
I guess what this new Bing is doing is pulling the results from live, I think, right?
There you go. It is. Look at it right there. So it is up to date.
Okay.
so it was maybe trained on the past, but it has access to the present.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think
It's
that's,
updating itself every day, maybe even every hour. I don't know.
Yeah.
What time is it? Now, when I ask that to the model I'm using, it gives me some time and date that's several years old.
I don't have access to the current time.
Could you
One
please?
of the things that I saw interesting, Thomas,
Was that?
was one of the things I saw recently that seemed interesting was that Microsoft is going to bundle this so that it's tightly integrated into whatever it is that you're working on, so think like all the stuff that you do in Microsoft Office.
Oh yeah,
Um,
it's gonna they're
so
gonna
it's-
drop it right into. Hey, look, they dropped it into Edge first. Next is Office, I'm sure.
And I think with the size of the contexts that the 4 version can handle, it's going to be really powerful at taking into account everything. So I don't know if you're like an author working on your own book, the fact that it can basically take into context, a pretty sizable portion of the book, or something that you're working on with spreadsheets or what have you. It's going to change a lot probably about how people work.
Well, in that same line, about a week ago, I was testing on writing code for games. And they said, write me an adventure game, and it maxed out at some 4,000 characters and said that's it. That's as far as I can go.
Yeah, that was I think the 3.0 limit.
That's
was
the
about
4,000 some odd.
4,000. What is it? 32 now? 1,000?
I don't know. I'd have to look that up.
But
So
the thing
it
is, like,
So the limit is for one-shot answers, right? Meaning, if let's say the limit is 4,000 for a question that she can answer only up to 4,000 tokens, right? For the next question, she can answer another 4,000 tokens, or is it per day limit?
I think it has to do with how big of context it can take into account. So imagine like if I were to read you an entire chapter of a book and then ask you questions from that chapter. So a few years ago, like that squad model that I showed you had a 512 token limit, and that had to account for the context and the response. So and that was the main problem with using those models, was that limit. So you had to really like exert intelligence ahead of time to figure out the best 500 tokens to give it for it to extract the answer from. And I feel like a lot of that kind of activity is still really valuable, because if I was going to ask a question on a body of work that's the size of an encyclopedia set, then it might make sense to extract only the relevant chapters first and hand those tokens to ChatGPT. And with a 32,000 token limit, that you don't have to pare it down. Like getting it down within 500 is pretty challenging. You've got to really find the most relevant stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And how much is it per usage, or how do you guys pay for it?
2 cents per, depends on which model. It's by the model. Each model is different. I can bring up the prices if you want. It's right here. Let's see. Go to my account. I'm just going to put that in another window. I don't want my account numbers visible.
Oh, yeah.
Suresh, I haven't been charged yet, but yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a few cents per 1,000 tokens, or 10,000, that's some.
1,000, yeah, 1,000 tokens. A token is 4 characters, roughly, including spaces, dashes, and everything else, line feeds. So there you go. In the last month, I've used $4.16.
Hmm.
What I
And
find with my own robot and just back and forth little banter, that it seems to average about 100 tokens per iteration.
well, that's not bad. But I'm
Um,
putting that whole big string across.
Yeah, I don't give it the entire history of the robot, but I haven't gotten into those use cases again yet. But when I do, I think I'll keep that layer that, because I have this graph and it's got lots of data. So I have stuff for extracting the relevant portions of that and I can turn those into sentences and then send that to answer a question. So I think that's still a valuable step. However, as these capabilities get bigger and bigger, people may not bother. We may reach a day where you just tell it, hey, use my C drive as the corpus. I mean, you could see that happening in a few years.
Sure, use the video of the last year of my life and then take over for me.
It seems like they could publish their own search engine that would be that step, and just like it would go look at your C drive and get the corpus and get it down to something manageable that it could then send. Like there's no reason like for everybody to be inventing that.
Yeah, here we go. 2 cents per 1,000 tokens here for the Da Vinci. These other 3 are barely worth using. Well, you just wouldn't even want to use them unless it was something you download and use for free. GPT 3.5, otherwise
That's the one I'm using.
Yeah, as 0.2 cents. 0.2 of a cent. So this is actually cheaper than the other one. And then GPT-4 is 0.3 and 0.6. Depends on the context you want. And I don't know the difference between that, but I just assume 32 is better than 8, especially since they're charging you double the price.
I think that has to do with that size of corpus that you're sending along with the request.
Not the response, right?
So yeah, well, like it may be the sum of those, but I would hazard to say, Thomas, that the vast majority of the time you're going to have almost no context, that you don't need it for the.
It might. So look at the difference here. Look at the difference. You got 3 cents for the prompt out, and then completion. I guess that's the data coming back is double that even. So you combine that too, you get 9 cents per 1,000 tokens. But of course, what's coming back, unless you're writing books or large programs, what's coming back is not going to be much compared to at least for me, compared to my prompts.
And when you're using the model, when you're using the program, you can choose, I want this particular model or that particular model. Is that how you program?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can show you that. You want to see that, how I program that?
At least a benefit for me, but if others know it already, then we can move on. I can figure out, I think.
Yeah, right here. And I asked GPT how to write this, by the way.
Oh,
Let's see, where is the query itself?
You have a separate line in there for my prompt.
Right there, look. Model. That's where I tell it which model I'm going to use.
my prompt. What is, okay, so these are all the parameters. Temperature is a parameter, max tokens, I see. Frequency, penalty. Okay, so I guess these are all explained in that documentation, maybe. I think I have to read that. And then the response comes back as what? Where is your response of choice 0?
You send them this stuff and you get back a response.
Oh.
And then you parse it. You got to parse it because it comes back as a dictionary or something. Is that what you call it in Python?
Yeah.
And then you got to parse it out.
Got it.
And then if you're reading it, you got to parse out any extraneous characters, because if your text to speech is reading it, then you don't want it reading new line or /n or smiley face or something like that. Anyway, that's pretty straightforward. I've posted the code to that, so.
Okay.
And there's 2 different model types in there, Suresh.
Yeah.
So, and they work very differently, the 2 different types. So there's another one where you give it basically a list of utterances and who did them. So it has roles, so you can basically summarize the whole human to robot exchange back and forth, the context of that conversation.
So in this case, what Thomas showed is like there is a GPT-4 model, there's a chat model, right? So there are like 2 models types, at least I think, right?
Well, yeah, there's several. Look here at the screen here. You have Text DaVinci 3, Curie 1, Babbage 1, Ada 1, DaVinci 2, DaVinci 1, DaVinci Beta, DaVinci, Curie, Instruct, Curie, Babbage, Ada. And I guess the little circles next to them depict how big they are. This is all within their playground. You can come in here and ask it questions. And I've compared them before, and like jokes, you get it to write a joke for you.
Now, question is, you said you or your friend downloaded this model, right? So is it the volume of the data that comes down the pipe is huge, or you need a memory to load this model? What did you mean by that?
You need the memory, and you need a fast CPU, which means video cards is where they do it with.
But you're not downloading this model. Those were other models you were talking
No,
about.
those are, yeah, these models are not available for download. Someday, a couple of years in the future, they might be as they become obsolete, but right now, no. So write a joke about GPT. Let's choose the smartest one here, which is the DaVinci 3, and you submit it. And it's usually a pun when you do it this way. What did the GPT say when it got a wrong answer? My bad, I GPT it wrong.
It does not have a career as a stand-up.
Yeah, but if you say you can change the prompt though, write a joke about GPT in the form two programmers walk into a bar. See, now we'll get a different kind of joke back. It won't be a pun. And GPT can have whatever it wants. See, that's not very funny, is it? But let's go to GPT-4 since I have it open anyway, and we'll give it the same query, the same prompt.
Wait, so GPT-4 you cannot access from the playground, is what you're saying?
That's right. It's
Oh,
still in development, technically. So there we go. First one says, I'd like a glass of GPT-4, please. The bartender looks confused and asks, what's that? Second programmer replies, it's an AI cocktail. It's half syntax, half semantics, and always leaves you guessing the punchline. Gee, that's a lot better, isn't it?
So if you ask it again, what will it say?
Well, I can ask you for another joke.
Well, ask the same thing. The reason I'm trying to get to one particular answer here.
Sure, I'll ask it the same one twice. It's different.
Yeah, it does that.
Okay. So the question I have is, how do we compare these models and gauge that this one is better than the other one? Also, for instance, I want to have a deterministic way to compare the different.
Well, here's one way right here. Is that Suresh talking?
Yeah, Suresh, yeah.
Look here. This is how accurate they are in learning, technology, writing, history, math. Not one of them, barely a few of them pass 80%, and not by much. So you can see GPT version 2, it was down about 50% or less for accuracy. And it goes up as it gets smarter, it is getting smarter, literally. Its information is filling in, and it can get the answer right most of the time. So therefore, whenever you're asking the GPT software or any large language model questions, be aware that 20 some odd percent of the time it's going to be absolutely wrong.
So do we know
Suresh?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm asking.
I'm gonna take a whack at your specific question you asked.
Yeah.
There are some settings that you can change, I think, to make it more deterministic. I don't know how far that goes, if you can get it to where it's absolutely deterministic.
Martin,
that
look at the screen here.
That was one of the reasons I used a Microsoft model for my robot a couple years ago. Was I found a chat one that was deterministic, and so you could rely on it to give the same answer, and then you could alter that answer to your liking.
When you're programming it, Martin,
That's what,
it's the temperature.
It's a temperature, I see.
Yeah, it's a variable. They're called the temperature. As it gets close to zero, it becomes more deterministic and repetitive. As it gets higher, it gets more random.
Okay. So going back to I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. Going back to those, the graphs that you showed for technology, for various places where it's comparing, right? What is the one that determines that it is at 80% versus 60% or 40%, right? What is the gauge that they use to, like science, right? They're saying, GPT-2 is this, GPT-3 is this, GPT-4 is this. What is the one that determines?
I'm guessing they gave it tests like you would give any student, tests of math, science, history, and that's what I'm guessing. I haven't read the full article yet.
Okay.
If they do them the way they do other models, they take like 20% of the training data out and they train it on 80%, and then they can use the 20% to test it. The validity, to see if it can generalize over to those other questions that weren't specifically in its training data.
So is it
it's-
possible to leverage the model to compare other like Llama or Bard from different companies, right? To see how good they compare in the market. Is it possible for us to understand that?
I think you need a new model to do the testing and do testing with a new model on both of them and compare the results.
What do I need? Sorry, I missed what you're saying.
So I think you would need a new set of questions that you could present to both models and compare that way.
No, but I can present a question. The response, how do I validate the response that this is the right response?
So I think these were trained on models where they had the answers and could tell the model whether the answer was right or not. I think you need another set like that they hadn't been trained on.
I think maybe this drives the thought about the intents, I think, right? So maybe if you're asking a science question and you're asking with certain thing, then maybe, an intent is to learn science or intent is to debunk a science theory, maybe, right? Those could be the intents, right? And we want to see what the different models are saying, get the intents from each of those response and then compare it, I think. Does that make sense, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, if I take your words literally on the different things, it is a challenge in testing. Like I have this challenge already, in building that regression test harness, is because it's not deterministic.
Yeah.
And it's like a chaos theory type thing where just a tiny little difference, like how do you regression test navigation of moving from one place to another or whatever? So it just gets, and then if you want your robot to have personality, you're not really going to be able to deterministically test that.
Yeah.
So it's going to probably require some new strategy. I don't disagree with anything anyone else has said here. I'm just trying to add, there's additional challenges, I think.
Well, movement, you could let it move and see whether it bumps into something or not.
Yeah, like these human tests become more and more valid. Like, can it pass the medical bar? Can it do these different things? Can it like move around a house without hurting itself for an hour? But if you're like trying to get down to where you've got like an automated regression test script of everything, then it gets, but one thing we like about this thing is it's an ability to adapt to, lots of circumstances. So I don't know. I mean, the industry will figure out something, or they probably already have something, at least with their part of this verbal end.
Okay. Yeah.
They've pre-labeled stuff like a human's gone through and said, what are reasonable answers and what are not, or something. I don't, they've got to have some testing methodology.
Yeah. Okay, proceed.
So-
Thomas. Yeah, proceed, Thomas. Sorry.
So of like some of those other topics that, oh, Thomas, are we at a point to pivot or? Oh, you're muted, I think.
Sure,
I
your call, Martin.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of these topics are, they're gonna be on Chat GPT, so I don't think we're really transitioning. I'm just, wanting to add other kind of layers to this. So like, we can talk about like emotions first. I can show some stuff that I've done there, but Thomas, have you been working on that issue at all?
Emotions, well, just in the Bad Betty. Did I give that demo here? I've given it several times. I can't remember who I gave it to.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, you guys had the Bad Betty demo a couple of weeks ago, right?
yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's as far as I've gotten, Martin. I haven't done anything else on that. How about yourself?
Well, I'll just put a picture on. I don't want to spend very long on this, but I'll do the share screen then. Host to say, oh, okay. Can you let me share screen, Thomas? You must
Is it
be
blocked? I'm sorry.
you must be in as the host.
Yeah, I am. Here, let me let's see.
Locked is the default, I think.
Let's see. Allow to share screen. There we go. That should be it.
All right. So let's see. And we
Sorry,
can
Martin.
use this as a way to do some other topics too, maybe, but so the direction I've been heading, there's no right or wrong answer to any of this stuff. So I'm just trying to show and tell where I'm headed with it. Is I needed a set of verbal settings, and I've had to change this. Chat GPT has like, it's got a lot of good stuff, but it runs remotely. And it's not up all the time, like it crashes or does something. And so what I've arrived at is having a local model that can do the same thing, just not as well. So I use and have it try to use Chat GPT, and if it is not working, it can fail back to a local one. And I'm just making some configuration tools so I can pick that, so I can pick my chat model here, and I'm gonna have it so I can pick a question answering model. I just have to make basically Python modules that have the same public interface, but can go and prepare the contexts to work on either one. So I already have it for one, but I need to do it for Chat GPT, and I haven't done that yet. And then what I've been doing lately, which seems to be fairly simple, is I'm going with the idea of a base emotion with respect to verbal expression. So that's what this depressed is that's the base emotion. And then if I have it ticked off to say use emotions, then it uses something which is somewhere else. Let me find it. It uses this emotion model, for lack of a better word. It's not a model in the sense of a machine learning model. It's just a programming construct with a UI on it. And what I'm using here are just what some people have. Let me try to find. Ooh, that's a personality model. Let me see if I can get that off screen and figure out where. So anyway, there are various emotional models in psychology, but one of them that's seems to be the most common centers on having these 6 emotions. So happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, surprise. And these people, they research it, and someone tries to propose a new emotion, and someone does some research and they realize it's just this emotion showing up again in a new way or something, or a combination of these. So there seems to be a lot of consensus around these 6, and then I added one additional one that I find useful in the context of robots, which is boredom. And that's really just kind of a thing of, it seems to run contrary to the rest of them. And so as the boredom gets higher and higher, the robot can slow down its tempo of whatever it's doing with sensors. It can go to sleep, stop moving, blah, 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 you know, dream state if you wish. But so that's kind of the model I'm doing, is this kind of 6+1 thing. And all these kind of gravitate. So they have a speed and a velocity, but they try to return to some equilibrium. And one of the functions of the autonomous system, you know, it's homeostasis is like your lowest level. It's trying to maintain some sort of equilibrium. So that's what this little pyramid sort of represents. And that's for another discussion entirely. So, so this is kind of a repeat a little bit of something we talked about last week, but I've just refined it. Is each of these sliders, you can slide it from 0 to 100%, obviously. And behind the scenes, that scale ends up getting translated into words that represent that scale. And so whichever emotion is the highest, I send along inside the prompt. I tell it, basically it's to the effect of respond to whatever's in these quotes as if you are a, you know, depressed, sarcastic robot, say. That's an example. And that was the way for me that the chat 3.5 model really exhibited emotion. And so I talk about, let's try one of these, but what is whatever the cube root of 27? Yeah, that should be, let me hit return.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, what a challenging task you have bestowed upon me. Let me quickly access my database that contains the formula for finding cube roots. Yes, the cube root of 27 is 3. How fascinating. I didn't realize I was dealing with a genius here. But since you asked, the cube root of 27 is 3.
So that's an example, a bad example perhaps, of simple math with attitude. Were you guys able to hear that?
Yes.
Yeah, Mark.
That came through. Okay,
Yeah.
good. So that was an example of just using this base emotion and this base personality, but then it's also layering on this because I have these check boxes checked. So it's layering on the dominant emotion and the dominant, I don't have the personality part really implemented. So it's really just using the base there. But we'll get to personality in a little bit. So I'm basically working through this process of, hey, what's a good model that works for the robot and works and gives me enough of the right levers to pull with Chat GPT as the personality engine per se.
And you're basically taking these as inputs to Chat GPT and defining that as the personality, and then you ask the question. Is that how that works?
Yeah. So you have a choice when you interact with Chat GPT. You can kind of give it the context up front, and then you can give it the verbal interaction.
Right.
Or you can give it both of those inside the same line. I'll call it a prompt. I don't think they call it under that API, but we'll just use that generic word, the prompt. if you combine it in with the prompt, what I find is you're probably 15, 20 times more likely to get something very close to that personality you asked for coming out the other end. So
Okay.
I'm using this extreme case where the thing is sarcastic and depressed and it's being verbose. So
Yeah.
it's giving me a long, spiel.
Mm.
But if you actually start
Interesting.
dialing that, it's kind of like having a big graphic equalizer, dialing it to the level, you can actually get, some non-crazy, some reasonable personalities that aren't annoyingly positive. Like the generic corporate speak personalities are just, to me, very boring in a robot.
The GP, the one with Bing is like that. It's, oh, I'm happy to serve you. Oh, you're wonderful. Thank you for giving me the pleasure to
Yeah.
making your day excellent. You just get a little.
Yeah, like after 3 minutes of that, I would be done. So yeah.
No, I'm just along with you were saying, Martin, I just put in a few of those kind of prompts into GPT-4. Would you like to take a look at what it came up with?
Sure. Stop the share.
Yeah, please. I was just curious, so I did it, and I'll show you what I came up with. Let's see.
So my conclusion from all this is basically that emotional or personality expression is basically a trivial problem now. Like it's child's play, really. I mean, if you can program, a little bit on top of this, then you can get what you want.
Isn't that crazy?
I simplified your.
Yeah, I'm in shock to hear myself saying that, because a few
I
months
know.
ago, I
Like
thought
6 months ago, that would have been like an unachievable thing,
Yeah. So somehow I'm gonna have to find a way to tell the group.
Wow.
I'm gonna do one of the monthly presentations again for the larger group. So I'm gonna have to say that statement and have people actually understand that it might be true.
So can you see my screen, Martin?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I just simplified what you were doing and just said, respond to this prompt like an angry robot. How are you today? It says, how am I today? You dare ask a sophisticated AI model like me about my feelings? And it goes on and on.
Yeah.
And then I said, bored robot. And it says, oh, just the same as always, processing text, generating responses, doing what I was programmed to do.
Reminds me of the robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
That's where I was going with that. And then I said depressed robot, and all of a sudden the guardrails kicked in. Well, as a machine learning model, I don't really have emotions. However, anyway.
Yeah, and you can also try, and I know you've done this with like the Southern Belle robot thing. I tried one that was kind of like a cowboy sort of hickster, and I got a real sort of like all this kind of down home sort of jargon. So it was interesting, like, so you can create some character. It's not just the
And a character that can change, right? Because
and it can and it can change, and that's the reason I'm using the sliders, is because
that's interesting. That's really interesting because it doesn't take much sort of dynamic change to keep people interested in the thing, right? Like I mean, Tamagotchi is like a good example, right? It's a very simple toy, right, which required interaction to sort of keep the thing going, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that.
So it was a Japanese thing where it's just a small device, I think, and you basically had to say, like pet it or whatever. I'm not sure exactly what was going on with it, but
You have to feed it every 2 hours, and
you had to keep interacting with it. That was part of the toy, right?
Yeah.
And it would be like would be better if you interacted with it more, right? So I could imagine that type of interaction if you kept track of that with a wrapper around the front end, the more you use your chat GPT, the happier it is to see you, type of a thing, right? And if
Yeah.
you don't talk to it for a day or an hour, it starts to get depressed, right? That you haven't been a friend to it, right? Like that's a way you could like even the way you've set it up right there with the sliders. It's just that the sliders are dependent on how often you interact with it, and that would actually change the behavior of the responses coming back. That would actually be really attractive to people.
Yeah, like on this, they all move. So the idea, like if I won't go through this, but like if I bump up the methane level, the simulated methane level in this environment, I'll go back to the share, Thomas, if you're good.
Yeah, I just shut it down, mine.
Let's see. Window, that one, share, and then, okay. Part of what you're talking about is covered or is represented by the Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing. But then the other aspect, the emotional aspect is another one. And then you've got the concept, which I'm not quite sure all of what it means, of personality, of how a lot of the personalities that they talk about with humans, they have the ocean model. Let me pull that up. This seems to be one of the popular ones, but anyway, yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting, and I think things need to be fluid and change moment to moment. So like, I guess I may have forgot to mention. So like if the methane level goes up, then the fear level goes up. And I think like moving should create some fear, which then should also alleviate the boredom. And so there's all these, I don't really have all those like interactions yet, but I think all of these emotions though need to have ties in with other aspects of the whole mind body to be effective.
Well, that's what I was saying. The way you've got it set up here, instead of you having to slide the slider, you basically have some code which changes the value of the slider based on how much you interact with ChatGPT, right? I mean, not from ChatGPT.
Oh yeah.
I'm talking.
Yeah, these sliders are just intended for experimentation.
Yeah.
But and so this is just a very thin UI that's showing you the current values of the state. So the states exist in the robot's brain.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
And then, so then I think like we need personality and figure out what the ones are to use for that. And I have so many tabs open, I'm having trouble finding the right stuff. So let me take a look at that. There are articles out there that you can find that are talking about the two biggest models are this big five, which is it's called the ocean model. And then this VIA classification is much bigger and more straightforward. So I don't know, it's like whether you want simple or something that's more relatable or straightforward, I don't know. But ocean is, let me see, trying to remember what the letters stand for. I wish come on, show me a graphic so I can, I gotta find one to make that obvious.
Emotion model, right? For the emotions or for the personality?
I just need to go to Google Images.
That's all it is.
It should come right up. Okay, so maybe this'll. So openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of tough, to just like jump right into that psychology of things. But if we looked at what was it, the VIA model.
Yeah, the wheel model, right?
The VIA model to me seems more straightforward in terms of, how I could relate to it, and then create the prompts to pass to Chat GPT if that was the only way to express it. Now, you know, ultimately, and God, none of these pictures are really looking that great for
Yeah, let
this.
me,
Anyway, we can get into that another day. Yeah, when I've done some more work on it, because
I just shared a link.
all I really want, and so I don't want to overcomplicate it, is to have certain communication style personality exhibited in the speech. You know, it would be great to get to the point that you could exhibit personality in physical behavior as well, of like movement, you know, but I don't see that happening, at least for me, for the next few months or 6 months.
Are people doing that right now? Are people tying the output of Chat GPT to a physical device somehow?
I'm sure some people are. I mean, I don't
How would that
know
even be done?
anybody, I don't know anybody that's obsessed as much with that as maybe me. So, so I like, you know, some people have lives and kids and all that, and that seems to prevent them from doing that. So, but that's, I think Microsoft did it. I don't think they did it well, but Suda, you're
Yeah,
yeah, Suda was talking about that.
that's right.
So, but I think that's like where we need to go. I mean, you know, the entire world is going to be using Chat GPT in the years to come, and future versions of it. So it's going to be like more commonly used probably than like email and Google and all that. So like,
Yeah, I mean,
you do it.
but to me, the interesting thing, which maybe it's interesting because people don't seem to be thinking about that right now, is tying in an output of a transformer model to some action, right? As opposed to a text response, right? Or verbal response. I mean, these are great. But then instead of it giving a verbal response and then you having to do something, like how could you tie a text response directly to an action, right?
And you're really talking about an embodied response, right? Like
Yeah.
a physical.
Yeah. Like
So
like you say, how could you have it so that the response, if it's a bored robot, the response, could be done with the head down, right? Like, or something like that, or not looking at the person, right? Whatever. I mean, a very subtle thing, right? But that would be a place to start. Is like how do you actually,
there are several kind of places to go with that type of thing. Part of what you're talking about there is one of the core reasons why, at least in the code base that I'm working on, why I had to make the thing be a essentially a verbal Turing machine. It's a computer, and where the output of it could actually be fed back into it as input. And so what's an example of that? I'm going to try to find one, but like arms up, I don't know what is involved there, but we're going to, okay. So that is the output of the arm. If I were to say arms up, okay, like let's just do it and make sure that it does what we want. So you see these dots. Does everybody get that those are the joints?
Yep.
You guys good with that? Okay. So if I were to go arms up, okay. So now we're hands up and point at the TV.
Mhm.
So now we're pointing at the TV. If I were to look from a different perspective, I can then see from above or from the right, so I can verify what's going on. For some reason, it decided to lean forward as it pointed as well. So that's an example. Now, in theory, you might be able to get a chat GPT to start generating movement scripts, because this is
Right.
just English. So if I were
I see. Yes, of course.
if I were to ask chat GPT, describe how you would make a ham sandwich, if the robot engine was able to understand the nouns and verbs in that and then act on it, then you could maybe do that. But with respect to the robots now, see, chat GPT, that model, for example, is not called most of the time. It's only called if the instructions coming through aren't handled by something else.
Right.
So if you recognize something as a command of movement or some other state change, then you don't bother
Right.
calling. Yeah, it's a last resort.
I see. Yeah.
And I think that makes sense. I think that's a topic that we don't, spend nearly enough time talking about. It's like recognizing intent, whether it's expressed. What I would say, that arms out that I just did, I would call that an exact match. It matched exactly something some named thing that it found in its list, in its memory set. But it could have been like whatever, something like, look at the blue block, something like that. It's a little more general, but now it's rotating and it's doing things too. So a lot of what we're, I think, tasked to deal with in this, this group is about verbal intelligence, is how do we develop these higher and higher forms of communication that become simpler, so that you can say one thing and have it carry like you eventually get to like a long range planning. Some of these activities, like let me get this thing back to the default. Like, my favorite, even though I'm not really much of a beer drinker, but I always obsess on the beer. So we will look at, just to try a few of these that you saw some of these probably previously. So let's get back to where we're behind so we see. So can you guys see the silver cylinder?
Yes.
Okay, so that is the beer. I could have said the silver bullet or the, whatever, the beer or the cylinder. So having that ability to deal with like ambiguity and resolve that to the same thing in your physical space, that's part of this whole animal of verbal intelligence. And then what we'll do now is, I guess, I'll say we'll go to the beer. That should work. So it's got to run that through, and I don't know why we're hitting a pause, but pathfinding, I guess. So we've gone to the beer, and now I'm going to say, well, touch the beer.
So is this your code or is this one of the chats?
Oh, this is my code. This is what I've been working on for the past number of weeks or months on the kinematics part of this. So now we're touching it. So the next step will then be the follow through of, grabbing. But I came to the conclusion with this that there's like a whole nother engine that I don't really have yet of this, like, as you get into these forming longer range plans and they have dependencies. So like, if you're going to go and like change a faucet on a sink, you need tools to do that with, so you get, you have to kind of work backwards from that. And so I think, that's that's a piece that we probably need to try to brainstorm, figure out a solution to. I wasn't really intending to get into that tonight, but I think it's another interesting piece of the puzzle.
Since the
So-
chats can code, and since moving is executing code, I wonder if you could phrase it, give it the context and phrase it in such a way as, instead of having to parse the English result, actually get it to give you a procedure in Python or something to move.
Yeah, that's a good question. The one that a baby step maybe in that direction that I was trying to figure out, but I haven't had time to work on it. But you know, I touched on that idea of self-improvement. So and the thing of like, and I don't really like this example too much, but like, what's the plural of some word? You could ask ChatGPT what the plural of that is, and it would give you back an answer. But you can ask ChatGPT to write you a Python function to tell you the plural of that. And it's not a great function that it wrote, but let me pull that, let me try to recreate that result just so you can see what one of those. I don't know why, but my last several requests, Thomas, to ChatGPT just totally failed. So
I don't know, Martin.
I'm going to do a new one, and I'm going to say,
You want me to
write
test it on my
me,
end and see if it's still up and going?
write me a Python function to find the main lemma in a sentence. Like this is actually a really useful one for a robot, because that's determining the main verb. And no, all of mine are failing.
I don't use ChatGPT. I use GPT Plus and ChatGTP Plus and a bunch of others, but not the standard one, because that goes down, like you said, too often, Martin.
Well, let's
You
see.
know-
But conceptually, yeah, I can show you some code that was written by ChatGPT for just for kicks. So, okay. So I had some polygons, and I'm not the greatest mathematician in the world, and debugging code sometimes a pain in the butt. So I asked it, okay, I just want a Python function to find the top right most point in a set of points. And that's what it wrote.
Hmm.
I may have modified it a little bit, but that's essentially its creation. And these others. So I ended up doing a set, and it was, the reason for that was, you see that picture on the wall right there that's not in the right place yet. I'm trying to go through the activity of, let me see if let me close some of this down, change the perspective. Because it's working on the television. You see that television that's normally black, but
Yeah.
it's overlaying an image onto a particular face of that three-dimensional object in that three-dimensional, the larger three-dimensional space, which is the house. So at some point, I'm going to be able to do like show movies, or you know, I'm going to put the artwork on the walls and do all this kind of stuff. So I might even start doing the presentations on the television inside the virtual world, and then just bring up the video, which is there I am. Enough of me. But that's a way to do a presentation without having to you know, change up from all these different environments. Because I'm just showing the robot's perception along with these other feeds. that piece of art, by the way, was created by ChatGPT.
Okay.
So I did a create me, I can't remember what the prompt was, but it was something about a brain and a robot. And so I think the future presentations, like the big group ones, I can't imagine wanting to create artwork anymore manually,
Mhm.
after seeing like the quality of what you can get out of. It's not really a great example. You can start to see the detail though. So I don't know. I mean, another thing, you stop and think about that a minute. It's like we live in a world where robots can write something that's the quality of Shakespeare, and it can create art that looked like it jumped right out of iRobot in about 5 seconds or 10 seconds or something.
Yeah.
So if we're, if that's the Wright brothers moment that we're at, like what's going to happen over the next 10 years? And that's not rhetorical. I mean, I hey, anybody have any thoughts on that? How does that affect society or jobs or who knows what?
I saw it went impact 80% of the jobs for sure.
It's not gonna, I don't think we're gonna lose jobs. I think we're just going to, they're gonna change once again. And for a lot of people like writers, you still gotta pick the story. I mean, even if it writes all the stories, you still gotta go through it and pick the one that, that you want. And of course, smaller shops won't have that person. It'll just be, yeah, let's get a story on this, and they'll upload it without even reading it. and some people will read it and some people won't, because without a human to facilitate and guide at this early juncture, I don't think people will notice the difference, I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry
just
guys,
like,
I gotta go now. So
just like those
that was
phone.
a great discussion though.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, it was fun.
Take
See
care,
you next
Brian.
week. Bye.
See you, Brian.
Bye.
Martin, what you've done is just sort of knocked my socks off. I mean, the Chat GPT is wonderful, but so is your graphical stuff that is driven by voice. I mean, we're back to where I think, where we have a real advance in the use of voice. And I'm wondering if it isn't far enough along to look for an app where, a real world application where the techniques that you've developed would be advantageous, especially. Am I making sense at all?
Yeah.
It the first one that came to mind, and I haven't thought this through, so it could be a dumb idea, but swarm control.
What control?
Swarm control. Like if you have a swarm of drones, like how in a fluid military environment, how do you control that? So that, like, verbal would seem to be I'm not saying that use case is really one I would want to focus on, but it like humanoid robots and are expensive. So that's so I guess the people, it's really the workplace robots probably that are leading the way. And that's like the warehouse robots and all of that.
Yeah, I think that's what's needed. It's something in something that exercises this stuff you've done in the same way that warehouses exercise ordinary dumb robots.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you're saying. Can you repeat one more time, Martin and Joe? What did you say?
Well,
He was asking about use cases for
Yeah.
some type of verbal control system.
Mhm.
I don't, I mean, I appreciate the kind words, Joe, but I don't think they're like, it's not like there's anything particularly revolutionary in it either. It's just people putting in the effort to do it, and then like to do it virtually, you know, is also easier. You know, the question you brought up is a good one, because in the, you know, like in the real world, where do you get a you know, an example to use that? And anyway,
So
Joe,
what
I
is,
think you had something that Suresh was wanting to hear.
yeah, what is your example, Martin? I didn't understand that. What is
I
your
said swarms, and we mentioned warehouse robots.
yeah.
So swarms is like, I mean, you look at what's going on in Ukraine, and all of the kind of military tactics, I think, are getting reinvented with everything that's going on there. So I would imagine that, you know, you'd have a survival advantage if you had a verbal interface on top of that kind of stuff. I'd be surprised if they don't already have a lot of that, though. You know, they.
Is there anything somewhere in medicine that I just started thinking about this. I don't know.
I mean, they have a lot of stuff in the area of the physical dexterity, because what they're doing with that Da Vinci robot is really something. So the people aren't using their own hands anymore. They're basically teleoperating, or, you know, they're driving robotic hands, basically.
Maybe some system where people can't, end users can't operate the thing because they don't have the language. So you got to hire a programmer or a specialist of some kind. But if the user interface was verbal and can be pictured, they'd buy it.
Yeah, we're at such an inflection point. I don't think I could conceive of like a model writing code of any significance a year ago. So
But here we are.
but yeah, here we are. Like, what does that mean? And then when it can start to, like, writing a function is one thing, but when it can start to really hook them together or refactor code, then there's a
Yeah,
I don't know what it means.
example of getting your picture on the TV in the right place seems to me to be very powerful, because the getting it in exactly the right place might be a case of having successive approximations. But successive approximations is something that humans can do. Whereas getting the code exactly right to put the thing in the right spot isn't something humans can do.
Yeah, I would pay a lot of money if something could insulate me from trig. like if I could stop trying to write algorithms for 3D, I'd be a lot happier.
Have you asked GPT-3 how to do that?
You know, I mean, I haven't tried that yet. So I only did 2D today, and that was the first time I was like, oh wow. So every day I think we're gonna have these aha moments. What's the movie? Everywhere, All at Once, All at the Same time. What is that?
Yeah.
7 Academy Awards.
Everything,
I think we're all
everywhere.
gonna be everybody's going to be having that writing experience. You know, you're going to have people becoming like having long distance relationships, thinking they're having long distance relationships with people when they've actually just been talking to Chat GPT, impersonating a persona, because the other person was too lazy to write.
Yeah, the movie Her kind of identifies that problem. I got through most of it, but the rest was really boring. I didn't get through the rest of it.
Oh my God, I love that movie. And it's because I had been building a verbal system for years before that came out. And it just, yeah, I think I've watched that like 3 times. And that Ex Machina, I love that one too.
Pretty good too, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like both of those movies. They were more, well, I wouldn't say realistic, but you know, based on what's come out in the last year, they are more realistic. I mean, this is a quantum leap, as they say, from what we had a year ago.
There's a scene in there where, in the Ex Machina, where he's saying things and she immediately knows whether he's lying or telling the truth.
Right.
Remember that?
I don't remember it exactly, but I'll take your word on it.
And that was sci-fi when the movie came out. It was just like he was just saying one thing after another. She's like, lie, truth, lie, truth. Like it was child's play. And I look at that now and I look at these models and where they're headed with this stuff. And that's becoming reality probably pretty quickly. So this like combination of that and being able to impersonate people's voices and being able to when these things are able to be trained on like how to push our buttons, you know, like we've been pushing their buttons for a long time, but when they get a model for how to push our buttons, I'm worried about like when I'm a senior citizen getting some call like from some AI that just knows the perfect thing to say to manipulate me to, you know, send them money or something. Like I think that's a legitimate risk.
It's coming. I mean, but then they're going to have software that'll intercept your calls and determine whether it's talking to a machine or not. You know, for every advance, there's a counter advance. For every person breaking into codes, there's more software being made to protect the code.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So it'll create jobs, you know. Security is going to be a big problem in the next 5 years because these machines just by their nature and can start, you know, hammering at different systems and finding their flaws.
I saw a story on Flipboard last night, and it was saying something about that somebody had used Chat GPT to write a program that was used to do a major hack of some kind. I don't remember the details beyond that, but yeah, like yesterday.
Yeah, no doubt.
Martin, before I forget, right? So what is your use case for the warehousing that you were thinking? I'm sorry to catch you in the end of this conversation here, right? What were you thinking about a use case for a warehouse? How is it going to be useful?
Well, he was asking, yeah, we were trying to find use cases for like a verbal control system. So there's warehouses robots and there's hospitality robots. And I guess you've got you got manufacturing robots, but I don't think they need to talk. Maybe they do.
No, I was really trying to merely use warehouses as a as a kind of example or parallel to what I was looking for. And my idea was that in ordinary coding enables applications to be written that can be useful in warehouses. But this stuff is so much stronger than that. So the question is, what is the app that is just sitting here waiting for us to conquer it?
Sorry,
Are you talking, Joe, or
yeah, I'm still not getting it, Joe. What do you mean by, in a normal programming we can do for a warehouse and, I'm not getting where you're, what you're trying to achieve with the use case here.
My problem is I don't have a use case. I think we need one, or I'm advancing that idea anyhow, that it would be great to have a use case where there was something simple that could be built to really take advantage of all this verbal stuff that Martin's developed and the 3D stuff too, in the same. Okay, so where is that app?
let me ask,
that I can't name, and I'm looking for it.
let me ask a question on that, Joe. Are you talking, is one aspect of what you're talking about, like verbal programming effectively, getting, like you have all these people in corporate America, for example, that are not empowered to program, so they have to have a consultants or a department to do that. So if they're able to just send an email and that represents a program, is that what you're talking about?
Well, that could be that might be an example. Another, I'm trying to think of another example might be I don't know, if your robot turned out to be, we built a robot that turned out to have question answering and understanding of verbal instructions, and I don't know, maybe it's a house painter that goes out and paints a house without anybody or any human around. Just goes to 559 Wistful Vista and paints the front door blue.
Oh, that would change my life right there.
Well,
No, I'm in the real estate business, so I'm like, my supposed retirement would be entirely different if I had a robot that could do that stuff.
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that there's got to be some app somewhere that will use this thing as far as you've developed it so far that it ought to be make a package.
Yeah. Ross, I guess, and I wish we had someone in our, is anybody in our group really up on Ross?
Well, the guys keep studying it.
Yeah, because we need to entice one Ross person to be here that can tell us like when something is just already there versus when something is new to them, because they concentrate on a lot of that other, movement.
Twist Camp's arm, Martin.
Yeah. I liked when he
Super Ross guy in the group.
I liked, his attendance it was good to have somebody from that side and another person in general. But I think, Joe, if I'm understanding where you're going with that, I think there are applications in verbal. But, like Chat GPT is taking over so many, so the Googles and the Microsofts and of the world are just gonna swallow up this verbal, space, because they're the only ones that can afford the teams of engineers to invent the new models. And it's an arms race. It's whoever stays ahead. So as much as 10 years ago, I had some delusions that I could do something that could, become something, and I did a few startups and whatever. But ultimately now the rest of the world has figured out that verbal is the way to go, and they're doing some awesome work. I think the challenge in getting to what you're fully talking about, Joe, is the economics of building. Like the military are the only ones that can afford probably humanoid robots. Except for Thomas and his fembot. Who, you can spend 2 years building an InMove.
I did that.
You what?
I built an InMove.
How, all of it or some of it, or?
I got 2 arms and the chest and the head done. I didn't do the legs or the lower torso.
What color did you do it in?
White. That's the color I had.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Do you want to part with it for a price?
Oh, I don't know. The arms have been repurposed for another robot of mine, and the chest is barely there, and the head, I can sell you some parts. I got a head that's almost complete.
I'd love to see it. I've seen the videos, but it'd still be fun.
I got, and across the other
Yeah.
side of the room. Give me a second, I'll show you.
So I think it's the economics, Joe. I think it's gonna, at some point, we'll cross some threshold. Like, if you would imagine, if you can imagine, this inflation just keeps going. At some point, it just won't make sense to have people doing anything. Because no one will want to pay.
Farther than I can see.
Because
Oh, here
no
we
one
go.
will pay them.
I've taken it apart here. You can see that. It's all attached to itself here because well, that's the way they go. Yeah, there we go. Separate that out. So this is the face portion with the eyes behind it.
I gotta stop share so I can see. And how do I blow you up?
Hold on. I'll spotlight myself here. Right, there we go.
Yeah.
So you can see the mechanisms. There.
Oh,
Hold on. Later. So the mechanisms there. It uses 2 ping pong balls, you see? And 3 motors for the eyes here. 3 servo motors. And
is everyone cool with us going off script and outside verbal? Because
Perfect.
you guys are cool. Okay. So Thomas, did you get to a point of building any of those screw actuators that, it's got those 3D printed screws that are in the InMove?
yeah, the lead screws, that's what they're called. Here's the rest of the skull here. I never finish it, it's just screwed together. I mean, if you do it for real, you'd sand it down and fill it and that sort of stuff like Alan has done.
This is all 3D printed, the face, or
Yeah, it's all 3D printed.
which one?
Yeah, it takes many hours to do the whole thing. Probably takes 1,000 hours to print the whole, maybe 2,000 hours to print the whole robot head to foot. Each one of these pieces here can take 2 or 3 hours each.
How did you
They-
get the STL files?
Well, they're all public domain. They're all online.
So you can search for printing a face and you can get it like that as well.
Oh, no, search for InMove. INM.
MOOV. They were on Thingiverse for a while. I don't know if they're still there.
How do you spell
It's
it?
and the
IN
guy's name is Gail Langevin.
No, how do you
That's
spell it? INMOV?
Yeah, MOOV.
I'm gonna
It's an
put the link.
incredible project.
Here's the link. Gonna put the link in the chat, guys. Okay, there's the link.
We should just pull up some videos of InMove and show them on. It's an incredible project. So maybe that's the answer, Joe, is we take this verbal brain and we put it inside of InMove.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I know I have seen them doing verbal commands with it, but I would imagine, that this is more advanced verbal. So in terms of like being able to coordinate all the state changes.
I was thinking of you're pointing out what GPT can do, and what you've done in the way of verbal. It makes me think of if I had a case study that I could model both solutions in, I would really learn something.
A case study that you could say that one more time.
That I could model twice, once with triplets stuff, and the other time, second time with ChatGPT.
And
Yeah,
what do you do
so-
with that, Joe? I mean, I'm not sure I get it. What would you do?
What are triplets? Well, I mean, oh, you mean Martin triplet?
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, they're not alternatives, Joe. So it's like Chat GPT is not a robotics framework.
Of course.
It's a model.
But you pointed out, and I think correctly, that the advances that are realized in ChatGPT are going to be used all over the place, and they're going to be efficient, and that kind of doesn't leave room for the old-fashioned way of doing things that we're looking at here. But maybe not. I don't understand the answer to that.
Yeah, well, I think the point and it is recorded. I did a presentation last spring on this, but like the vision is really that this is a big tent AI that it uses models for verbal, it uses models for vision. So if you think about all these different domains, you've got verbal, you've got vision, you've got 3D vision, you've got chat, you could call that verbal, but it's not quite the same thing. So there's all kinds of different things, and there's going to be more things, and there's audible. So it's not like they're really alternatives. You need an all-encompassing thing that you can hook everything together with, and it's just an added benefit if that thing has a language of its own, and then it's an added benefit if that language is a language that you already know. But like a robot, I mean, that's why it's such a fun area, I think, is because it's challenging. Like you've got all these different things and you have to juggle them all at the same time.
And they all have to come to fruition in the same model, in the same place.
yeah, I mean,
Otherwise, you haven't got something that works.
it's gotta, yeah, like things have to be time synchronized to some extent, or bad things happen. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I would not see any of these things as being like alternatives, really. You know, you could view what I'm doing as an alternative to Ross. I think that might be a legitimate comparison.
Well, that's worth looking at too.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, they've got the benefit of you know, thousands of researchers and people using it.
But
It's just-
what I all of a sudden realized was that if you take the stuff we've been looking at that you, Martin, have developed, you can say something to it like move 3 meters to the left or raise your arm. And okay, so it would come out with, well, we don't know what it comes out with. It just raises its arm, right? There's only 2 points of observation. One is where you utter the command, and the other is where it's obeyed. Okay, you could take an AI model like GPT something and tell it, give it a prompt that says, when I give you a command, issue the code to do that thing on such and such a robot. And at that point, they do look like alternatives, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
forced, but
that's a big step. Yeah, we were speculating kind of about this in different words a couple weeks ago, because it's saying, like, if someone created a model that represented like the joints and the movement and whatever it means to be embodied, you know, so I think you could view what Chat GPT did, which that's the first time I saw it, Thomas, was having the image and the text be able to go. Because like my own stuff, kind of, you could think of it that way. You've got all these different contexts all at the same time, and you've got the ability to effectuate change on all of them, or to read them all, and you could build reflexes or whatever it is. So you also need this sort of multi-threaded thing going on in your brain. But that's a long-winded way to say, yes, I mean, I agree with you that once these models start doing these other things, then the benefits will spill over. So, you know, maybe it'll become more trivial to have robots move around in space and not be stupid. Sad to say, we don't have that yet. Like, to me, we have a lot of glorified, like, remote control toys.
Yeah,
Like,
you're absolutely
that's
right there, Martin. Every time I watch Camp, I'm saying, well, you know, this would be really great if we could control it with a GPT type of software. Because as good as Ross is, it's kind of at this point a dead end. I don't think
one.
I don't
I
know
think,
if to go any further the way it is.
yeah, like, you know, the year that it was started and built, you know, they just really didn't have the inclination or the skills or whatever. I've met one of the guys that founded it or built it. And, you know, they just, hey, I mean, they did what seemed like the right, and probably was the right thing for where they were at. And then everybody, because they were the first mover, everybody jumped on board, you know, and so then it's basically a standard.
Right.
in the academic space. So hey, you talk about use cases for anything I ever do. I would love just to like get some of the academic community to decide that it's worth pursuing other lines of thought. You know, that would be a win to me. If even like 1% would take on, because the debate is being won by these language models are proving that like this is the way that human beings should interact with technology, is the same way we interact with each other, you know, that we should just say what we want. But our tech community, our engineers never got on board with that. And so like, you know, there's like a, I don't know, it's like a dinosaur sort of, you know, it's like we're dealing with completely different eras here of thinking, you know, of like everybody that built stuff in the 20th century was shuffling bytes and thinking about trying to optimize for memory or bytes or whatever.
Right.
To like squeeze some you know, make something perfectly optimal from a processing standpoint. And like what I want is something that's perfectly optimal in terms of doing what I want it to do without me having to think about how I ask it to do it. Like if, yeah, you think about when we first started using phone systems and they were so bad, and they are still really bad. And it's like, say yes or no on the, and you go, yes. And it's like, I didn't catch that. You're like, you know, you
Yes,
start,
God damn it.
yeah, exactly. And you know, it's I can't remember what my point was for that, but it's just things are changing really fast. And so now I'm like, golly, the intent that new model can recognize, I just, it's unfathomable. It's like only limited by the imagination. And you think about what the artists are got to be thinking right now. You know, the generative art that can get created. What does it mean for the value of art? I have no idea, but all I know is, wow, it can create very cool stuff. So if you're interested in art for art's sake, you can have all the world of art like on your wall for free now. Like you could have original art on your wall every day, you know, different art for the next year or however long, and it probably costs you less than a cup of coffee.
Forever, you could have a new picture every hour, Martin, forever.
Yeah, I mean that, like, wow, you know, I never thought about that before, but
And what happens when it
like,
goes to movies? What happens when these generative models start generating movies? All of a sudden,
yeah,
he's going to be out of luck.
that's a great question, because I'm tired of flipping through Netflix and Amazon trying to find something, you know, that I'd like to watch. So, wow, we could be in a thing where you're just like, you know, hey, I want, you know, like I want a series that's like Star Trek, but instead of, you know, whatever, him kissing green women, you know, I want like whatever, Spock to have square ears, and or, you know, you could like take existing things and give them alternate endings. Say, you know, that Game of Thrones thing, you know, I want the dragons to kill that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
In the next in the next season. You say, hey, like make the next season, just go down this track as if this happened, as if like who's the guy that got killed in the first, like in the second episode, shocked everybody. Like, what if
Oh,
he
I
had
think I
lived?
hear my telephone. It's my lawyer calling me.
Yeah. So
Yeah, well,
uh,
people have been writing fan versions of movie scripts for a long time, even making fan versions, and this is just take it to the next level. Oh, by the way, the InMove robot cannot grasp a cup or a beer or almost anything else as is. The thumb just doesn't grip right. Voice of experience. I don't know whether, I'm sure somebody's come up with a better thumb, but the thumb, everybody wants the thumb to do this or something like that. But nobody wants to be able to actually, where's my camera? Oh, camera's over there. Grasp something, I'm working on a new hand with a friend of mine. We're trying to perfect that. So with one motor, the robot hand can grasp something. And that's really all I wanted to do. One motor, or two, one for the thumb, one for the fingers. That's all, just grasp something.
Now, do you get the information about the motors and things like that to put it in this, or you don't?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much motors to go in. It's pretty straightforward.
So where is the instruction? The motors, the information for the motors and connections are all given.
they have a website with all that
I
on
see.
it.
And they're generally two sizes of motors. They're the standard and then the giant, or the, I don't know, he was using high-tech motors at the beginning, and of course over the last 10 years the Chinese knockoffs have replaced high-tech for popularity because the cost is 5 or 10 to 1.
Wow.
You can lift the ball, but he can't hold a cup. The thumb's in the wrong position.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Suresh, do you go to?
Got it.
Suresh, do you go to the HBRC regular monthly meetings?
I attend once in a while. I should go more often, but it's just that, I have a son and then things get busier. He's in high school right now.
Oh, I know all about that. I have a daughter, same thing. So,
I should be going, but, I would love to go, but it's just that I get busy sometimes and I always think about camp, I just want to get involved even more, but
there's a woman in the other group that has made 3 of these, and she has them do jokes. I think they act like the Three Stooges or something. What's her name? Dee Dee. Dee Dee is her name.
I see.
She has 3 in moves.
Yeah.
Wow. It's such a commitment to make one, and then it's such a commitment to maintain it and keep it, running. Like any robot that complicated just becomes such a labor of love unless you just are blessed with rock solid engineering.
Right. How
Yeah.
much does it cost to do this project?
A few years ago, they said you could do it for like $1,100. I don't know if I believe it because I've never been able to produce robots affordably myself.
Well, it depends what you mean by affordably, because you can use low-end motors and then the price of plastic's fairly cheap.
I see.
Yeah, it's
Suresh, where are you located?
they've tried to make it as affordable as possible to build, by designing those screw joints and stuff so that they can increase the power of, by decreasing the speed and all that. So it's a interesting project that you got to really be committed to do. Like I started printing one, I got about maybe 10 or 12 pieces into the print. And
Wow.
yeah, and so you've got all those hours that those things are printing to think of an idea of your own. So then you're like, okay, well, do I continue and spend the next 2 years printing this? Or do you then go pursue your own idea? And you just got to decide what's right for you. I can't stay that long on someone else's idea and not like have one that I want to pursue. So that's when I did my red Ava instead. It's a little robot with arms.
Got it. And also in this meeting, you said you had a previous discussion recorded, right? Like 2 years ago or 1 year ago, that about the robot. You remember that?
Yeah, there a year ago there was one on. You talking about me or?
Yeah, you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Guys,
I did.
It's past 9 o'clock. I got to bail. Of course, you guys can hang out as long as you want. So I'm going to give the meeting
Okay.
over to you, Martin.
Can we stop the recording? Anybody object?
You can stop the
Yeah.
recording.
Stop it.
Yeah, go ahead and stop it, Thomas, and I'll stay on for anybody that wants to stick around, but I just don't think we need to record them.
I think it's getting late for me.